We do have a few new people, so welcome. Welcome to the Grand Piano Series. It's great to see you. We're based in Naples, Florida, and we actually have live performances, and I'm really excited to have Avery join us on Monday night. And I'm the artistic director of Grand Piano Series and the president of Grand Piano Series. And Magdalena, thank you for joining us back. You know, it's great to see you. Magdalena has done a fantastic lecture series for us in autumn, Enjoyment of Music. Yes, 5 stars all the way. Yes, and so we're happy to have you talk about the program and it's there's so many interesting ways how you're connected to this particular program. Uh, Many of you don't know, actually, Magdalena was the MC for the piano competition for the finals. She was, David, you are still unmuted. I'll
I'm
mute you.
sorry.
So Magdalena was the MC at the finals, and so she's met every, and she has announced the major prize that Avery has won at the National Chopin Competition, and very much involved with Chopin music and society. I mean, you're also in Kosciuszko Foundation, right? You're the artistic director of that, so it's fantastic. Anyway, thank you, Magdalena. It's your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. It's such a thrill to be back and wonderful to see familiar faces as well as the new ones. So if you guys thought that the enjoyment of music was a mad dash through the music history, this is going to be even crazier because we have half an hour to discuss some of the greatest masterpieces written for the piano. And then we will open the floor for Q&A with our pianist, Avery Gagliano. And yes, I must say that it's hard to describe the thrill of announcing the triumph of Avery at that competition, you know, with hundreds of people in the hall, and you should have just heard that applause when her name was said. It was really a thrill. So Avery has a very interesting program coming up, very thoughtfully put together, and I'll be very curious to hear her own thoughts on the process of composing this particular selection. I have my own ideas, but I'm really looking forward to hearing more. I'm going to start with Mozart, and we know that Chopin adored Mozart. He actually also asked that the Mozart Requiem be played at his own funeral. That was his sort of dying wish. We start with Sonata in the Köchel catalog number 533, composed in 1788, so only 3 years before Mozart's death, which happened very untimely. Mozart was only 35 when he left us. The sonata is kind of a collage. He wrote 2 movements of it first, the Allegro and Andante, and then he decided to repurpose another piece he had written earlier. And I think we've all done it, we must admit, we've purposed our lecture notes here and there, to meet the deadlines. Who knows what happened, but that we know that the finale, the rondo of the sonata comes from an earlier piece that is often performed separately. Yes, one could talk for hours about the sonata form and how it became a template for composers to write very quickly. I know many of you are very versed in music, so you probably know already about the 3 main sections of the sonata form within the first movement. So you've got the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation, and everything is very well prescribed. So this allows composers to churn out pieces very quickly. However, I must say that for every Mozart sonata, which is a gem, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other sonatas which have not stood the test of time, but may have even been more popular at the time. I want to focus mostly today on that finale, that third movement. it is a wonderful document of how Mozart might have improvised. A rondo form is built in such a way where you hear the material A, let's call it, and then you hear the so-called couplets, A, B, A, C, A, and so on. This way you get to rehear the main material in various guises with wonderful improvisation. And we know that Mozart was a great improviser. With some of his piano concerti, and we talked about this in our enjoyment of music lectures, he never even bothered to write down his part because it was all up here. He was always chasing his own deadlines and never even wrote down his own part because he was able to get through it to improvise. And so that is something I love to think of when I listen to this rondo. So the third movement, let me share my screen, and you're going to hear a recording by Robert Levin. He is a pianist and a musicologist who specializes in the music of the 18th century, and he is playing here. This is recorded live from the Wigmore Hall a few years ago in London. He plays the forte piano, so it's a copy of a Walter forte piano which Mozart would have known, and as opposed to the piano, and you're going to hear the recital on a gorgeous 10-foot Fazioli, as opposed to that piano which has its hammers wrapped in felt, the forte piano has its hammer wrapped in leather. So the sound quality is quite different. But just listen to how irreverent also the music is, and how Mozart really shows that he knows he's much better than all the other composers around. So you, when you listen to Avery play, also pay close attention to how many variations there are in the rondo itself. And I am sure she's going to do a wonderful job bringing out these differences and the creativity. You will be interested to know that Edvard Grieg, the Chopin of the North, the 19th century Norwegian composer, actually transcribed this very rondo for 2 pianos. And I want to share with you just a little bit of it. Here it is played by Elizabeth Leonskaya, and Sviatoslav Richter is actually playing the second piano part. So the first piano does the Mozart as written, the second piano does the Grieg and sort of improvisation or enhancement. I mean, I don't think that Mozart's music can be enhanced. As you probably remember from the famous Milos Forman movie Amadeus, Salieri says, you take away one note and the structure will fall. So you change one phrase, there will be diminishment. But here is a 19th century take of the Chopin of the North on this rondo. going to fast forward to this really adorable moment where you are going to hear the chirping of the second piano. It's very reminiscent of Grieg's piano concerto. So as always, I am just using the videos that are available on YouTube, so you can very easily find them if you wish to hear more. All right, well, I think that's, with that, I must move on to the Mazurkas of Thomas Ades. So a Mazurka is, the term Mazurka immediately brings to mind the 59 Mazurkas of Frédéric Chopin. And Chopin himself acquired the taste for Mazurka as a teenager. He and his friend went to the country in the summer as kids and spent basically entire summers frolicking with the locals. And it was from the locals that Chopin learned the taste of the music. We know that he attended weddings and various dances and celebrations, often taking note, special note of the music. We know it because he wrote letters to his parents, which were written in this hilarious form of a kind of a newsreel or a news feed. And so he would report to his parents that some chicken hatched, and a piggy ran away, and somebody got bitten by mosquitoes. Oh, and by the way, I heard fabulous mazurka at this wedding. And so we know that he observed the style. What's really fascinating about Chopin's mazurkas is that he never really quotes folk music itself. He invented his own tunes that sound very much like Polish folk music, like that of mazurka. So there is Thomas Ades, a British composer who will be turning 50 in March this year, who wrote these three mazurkas. It's now 11 years ago. They were commissioned for the Chopin Bicentenary for Carnegie Hall, and Emmanuel Ax, no less, was the one to premiere them. They are absolutely inspired by Chopin's not only lyricism, but those lovely, dotted rhythms, the dance qualities of the mazurkas. But Thomas Ades is also paying homage to another Polish composer, Karol Szymanowski. We did not get to discuss him during our lecture series, but when I heard the first mazurka, and I will play you a fragment of it, it immediately brought to mind the interpretations of mazurka as the art form by Szymanowski. In other words, showing a much different landscape, much higher mountains, if you will, just kind of rougher harmonies also. Let me start with the Ades, and we're lucky to have his own recording of the piece. I also want you to pay special attention to how Ades he really plays like a composer in that he is always showing the sense of wonder for the piano as an instrument and for its sound. So let's take a listen. So you will you notice, I'm sure, that Ades is really departing from the tonal language here. We still get that atmosphere of the mazurka, of the folk music, and Chopin is certainly on our mind here, but Ades, you know, pretty much says goodbye. He just flirts here and there with tonality. And I will just play a tiny fragment of the Szymanowski mazurka, which this is very much modeled on. Just listen to how the ornaments sort of imitate the fiddling of the, perhaps of the local violinists, fiddlers, I should say. And every mazurka is built upon this ternary structure, A, B, A. So now we're entering the B section, which is much more lively, just as you heard it in this piece. And so you have these very characteristic rhythms, the energy level changes. So when you listen to the Ades, also, you know, think about the Szymanowski. I will write you the name because maybe not everybody is familiar with his output. Szymanowski, this is Opus 50 mazurkas. And this, you just heard a little bit of the number 1. In the third mazurka, Ades is really playing with quotations, perhaps of Chopin's mazurka himself. Just listen to this for a moment. I'm going to share the screen again. And let yourself be just gripped by the first few notes and allow your mind to associate this with any given number of Chopin mazurkas that you may know. So you see that Ades, as I mentioned before, is fascinated with with the kind of richness of the piano sound, and he loves to take time and listen to this grand beast, you know, really reverberate through the air. But if you just, this is a beautifully poetic beginning. Just this itself reminds me of Opus 50, Mazurka, where Chopin makes you wait for the rest. Also, Opus 33, number 4, right? But Ades has his own approach here. Did you just hear that? Doesn't that sound like just that 5 seconds? So it's a wonderful sort of a memory association, maybe even stream of consciousness kind of game that Ades plays with us. And so he is an incredibly prolific composer, incredibly successful. If you just look at his biography, he has raked in many composition prizes, including also a Grammy for Best Opera Recording. I don't know how many of you were lucky enough to see his Exterminating Angel, the opera that he did recently. I think that the Met Opera website has it available in HD. It's an opera based on Louis Buñuel's surrealist film, which is about people who are unable to leave a party, a dinner party. Just fascinating to, you know, how one puts such ideas to music. All right, well, also one last interesting fact, Ades was 39 when he published these Mazurkas. And that's the age when Chopin left this world. So we wish Thomas Ades a long life. I'm very interested to see what he does next. Now, with the remaining few minutes, I have to cover two important works of Frédéric Chopin's. His Sonata number 2 in B flat minor. Chopin was only 29 when he completed the piece. Probably the most famous movement of this 4-movement sonata is the Funeral March. And the 4-movement sonata, I think it really alludes more to Beethoven symphony kind of the format, the 4-movement symphony. Chopin does include a scherzo, which was Beethoven's idea. So in that way, I think he's tipping his hat to Beethoven. The Funeral March was written 2 years before the sonata was published. And interestingly enough, it was an arrangement of this march for orchestra was played at the graveside during Chopin's own burial at the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris. But coming back to Mozart, you know, during the funeral mass that Chopin had at the Church of La Madeleine in Paris, he had a Mozart Requiem performed there at his request. The Funeral March was found repulsive by Robert Schumann, who on the other hand was incredibly avid fan of Chopin's, but he just thought that there was something off, something sinister about the piece, and he would have preferred it to be perhaps a smoother kind of an adagio. Well, here, while I'm at it, I want to start focusing our attention on Avery's playing, and I found a wonderful recording of Avery herself playing the Funeral March at Curtis Institute, where she studied. I'll just play a little bit. You will hear more on Monday when it comes to her recital. The 4th movement is probably the strangest of them all. Mendelssohn said of the whole sonata, "Oh, I abhor it." Schumann said about the full piece that 4 of Chopin's maddest children came under the same roof. They just couldn't wrap their minds around this piece. Anton Rubinstein, a pianist and composer, Russian pianist and composer in the 19th century, said about this final movement, which is really just a unison of the two hands playing a melodic line, the strangest melodic line. I think that a composer of the 20th or the 21st century would have gladly signed their name under this piece. It's just so unusual. But Anton Rubinstein famously remarked of this fourth movement as reminiscent of a wind howling around the gravestones, because it follows that funeral march. Let me find the timestamp. Here. Oh, Avery, when do you play this? 20. I think it's around here, where you play you can almost tell by the body language, where the finale begins. Sorry, it's maybe not exactly the timestamp. And this is the only chord, that last chord is the only chord that you hear in this entire movement. The rest is just so incredibly mysterious. Oh, did I not share the screen? Yes, I did not. Sorry. Okay, very quickly, last piece, which is actually the closest to Avery's age when Chopin completed it. It was the last Polonaise Chopin wrote when he was still in Poland. So he's around age 20. He finished the piece when he was already in Vienna. And by Vienna, he later ended up in Paris, as we know, for the rest of his life, to become a very respected member of the Parisian society. The piece existed first in a version for piano and orchestra. And then 4 years later, Chopin decided to add the gorgeous lyrical introduction, the Andante Spianato. Spianato meaning smooth or even. And he added that little fanfare that connects the two movements. It now exists as a fantastic, dazzling work for solo piano. I just have a very quick screen to share of Avery playing the piece at the Van Cliburn Junior competitions. This just shows you how young Avery is and how very accomplished already. 1723. That's what happens when you're trying to rush. Here. It's so beautiful, Avery. I'm so sorry to have to stop it. This is another wonderful example, coming back to Mozart improvising on the same melody. If you listen to this Andante Spianato, you will notice how many ways Chopin is able to dress this tuning. So I really can't wait to see what Avery has to say about it. In fact, 2 years have passed since this performance, and I'm very curious to see how one kind of revisits a work of that size, now that she may not be a junior anymore. I don't know, Avery, you tell us. Let me just play a little bit of the Polonaise. Okay, I will stop right here on the cadence so that you all have time to ask Avery questions. But if I may ask the first one, how did you go about composing the selection for the recital? And how do you feel about the pieces that you have now performed a whole bunch of times? How do you revisit them? What's your thought process?
Well, first of all, thank you for your wonderful notes. I will say, starting with Mozart, this piece is one of my favorite sonatas by Mozart. And something that I find very unique about it is the counterpoint writing. And that is reminiscent of Bach, who Chopin also greatly idolized and admired as a composer. So there's that connection. In terms of the Ades, of course, the Mazurkas the concept of the Mazurkas tie in with Chopin very naturally. There are so many quotations that you can hear, even in the second Mazurka, for example. It reminded me a lot of Chopin's Opus 24, number 2 Mazurka. Just the opening measure, you can hear the similarities in the melodic line. And the Chopin Sonata and Andante, Spianato, and Polonaise, they are near and dear to my heart because they're pieces that I've grown with in the past 2 years. The sonata is such a deep and emotional work, and I find that there's always, with Chopin's work, something new to discover. And so, to answer Magdalena's question, as I've worked on the piece over the years, there's just this sense of constant discovery of new details. And also, as I learn more about Chopin and who he was, it also informs my playing. So I hope that gives a general answer of that question and how it is to always enjoy and experience that wonder of his music.
Thank you, Avery. Which leads me to the question, are you 19 right now?
I'm 19.
Okay. So Chopin competition is probably one of the most incredible competitions in the sense that you have to learn an incredible amount of body of work of just Chopin's compositions, right? So what prompted you? I mean, you were 18 when you were in the competition. You were probably 17 when you started studying, right? Or maybe even earlier. I mean, was it something that you thought for a while, several years, you were thinking I should be doing that and I would love to learn all of the Chopin works? Or because it's a lot of time to dedicate just to the compositions of Chopin.
Well, Chopin is a composer who is very near and dear to my heart. And I have always felt the most deeply connected to his music. He's such a lyrical composer, and I love to sing. So to me, his music has always been so natural. And over the past 4 years, I had actually been a part of the Chopin Foundation scholarship program, they do wonderful work to support young pianists. And so each year I was learning a little more Chopin repertoire. And so that was the foundation that I built my repertoire off of when I was thinking about attending the competition. So I had 4 years of amassing works by Chopin. And so when it was time to do the competition, I figured that since I learned all these pieces and I loved Chopin so much, why not go for the experience?
That's great. And what about your piano teachers? How did they react to your proposal?
My teachers, my one teacher, Gary Graffman, who is a legend, he's known to not support competitions very much because he really wants to encourage students to always learn new repertoire and just expand their body of work in general. But they were both my teachers at the time were very supportive, and really because mainly my mindset toward a competition is not to compete, but more for the experience of just performing and sharing this wonderful music with an audience. And that's how I always approach the competitions that I've participated in. So with that mindset, I think it's a lot different than if you were thinking about it to go and try to prove yourself or to make a statement.
Well, just from little short exchanges that we had, I picked up on the fact that you like the audience. You love being with people and communicating for people. One of the questions you asked, is there an after party? So, so I understand. And I mean, this year must have been a challenging year in that sense, right? Because there's a lot of live streaming where you don't necessarily, you're not with people, right? How did you get through this? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It is a challenge, and at least for myself, so much of my energy comes from the audience, and during a performance, you're always responding and reacting to the live feed that you're getting. And so if you're doing a recording, for example, or playing a live stream concert, it's very difficult because you don't have that immediate response from the audience. So I haven't done many performances this past year because of the pandemic. I just did a recording in Oregon. And again, it was the same experience where you have to prepare a bit more in the sense that you're recording this music and you have to treat it as a performance even though you can't see the audience.
But I mean, it's a different sensation, right?
Because it is, absolutely.
You do get this energy and feedback from the live audience, which I as a performer, I definitely treasure and value. And I love hearing the silence and the tension. You hear the tension, it's so that's we'll get you a fantastic audience, I can promise you
I'm
that.
looking forward to it.
You have the best audience ever, really. Avery, when you say I love to sing, what does that mean?
I grew up singing. I'm not trained, but I love to sing. My first introduction to music really was watching The Sound of Music, and that has influenced me greatly. One of my hobbies is to write pop songs in my spare time, and yeah, I just like to come up with melodies. I mean, I think we all secretly sing in the shower, do we not? And so it's just something I love to do, and it's second nature to me.
So the songs that, the pop songs that you are writing, are you also recording them?
I'm not recording right now, but the goal is at some point to find a producer and produce them.
That's great. I mean, we do have people who love singing and appreciate that very much. So I don't know, maybe we'll try to entice you to sing a song for us as an encore. Oh, well, going back to the Chopin competition, can you tell what your life was like for 1 year before you entered the competition? Uh, how did you balance it with all the other things that you had to do? And did you have to play recitals with other programs, for example, during the preparation time?
It takes a lot of planning because the repertoire was so large. It was over 2 hours of repertoire. And performance was my key to success. Just running through different pieces of my competition program in recital was the best way to prepare, because there's no other way to practice performing except by performing. And fortunately, I wasn't obligated to perform any other repertoire. So as I approached the competition in the few months before, especially, I was able to just focus on the Chopin repertoire.
Right. And so now, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the Warsaw competition is happening, right?
It is
That's going to be in October,
October this year.
right? So definitely an exciting time there, and so are you trying to play through the repertoire, the competition repertoire, as much as you can at the moment?
I'm trying to keep it warm, and that's why it's wonderful to have these performances where I can sprinkle in works by Chopin and just keep it in my hands.
Well, maybe we can make you stay for a few encores and you can play a few more selections just to keep your hands warm and the repertoire fresh. Well, I'm happy to open up to our guests, our audience members. If any of you have questions or you're interested um, about Avery or Magdalena, we have both of them today. So, Greg.
Thank you. Magdalena and Avery, thank you for being with us this morning. This is great. Avery, you spoke about how as you have continued to learn things about composers and the music and had life experience, it's changed your approach to your playing. I was wondering if you could give us a specific example of how a piece that you might have first learned changed, your playing of that piece might have changed since you first learned it till now, if there's a specific way to express that. While you're thinking about that, I wanted, in case you didn't notice, Daniela said in the chants that she will provide an after party. She really means that. And the other thing is, when you talk about songwriting, I think Milana pursued that question a little bit, because Michael Stefanos, who is also one of our members here this morning, is an aspiring songwriter.
Oh, we'll have things to talk about. To answer your question, Greg, this past summer I read Alan Walker's biography of Chopin, and just understanding the journey that he experienced as a composer and having to leave his homeland because of the revolution, and just the weight of the situation and the impact emotionally that has on somebody to leave your homeland, to leave your family, to move to an entirely new place and make a new life for yourself. That changed the way I understood many of Chopin's work, the emotion behind it. There's so much longing, so much pain and sorrow that you really need to know that background in order to understand what he was going through and why his music is the way it is. Does that give you a sense?
That's excellent sense. So when you, knowing that that kind of work helps you interpret the music. When you approach a new piece, then do you actively seek out opportunities for that kind of understanding?
I do. And there's always opportunity to learn. There was so much about the Ades that I didn't realize, especially the connection to Szymanowski's Mazurkas. So that was very interesting for me to learn. And so yes, for musicians, I think it's important to always be informed about the works that you're playing, not just about the specific work, but also about the composer in general.
Thank you.
Daniela?
Good morning, guys. I'm sorry I'm hiding behind the camera because as Milana knows, sometimes we have such late nights, you don't want to see what people look like when they've worked through the night, but I'm really enjoying listening to this. And one of the things I wanted to reflect on, Milana, I appreciate you stressing the fact that Avery is so young, diving into something so strenuous, serious, and challenging. Avery, I wonder, within your environment, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that you find inspiration? Do you have other friends and people doing the same thing as you do? Do you struggle with inspiration sometimes? Do you sometimes feel that you're one on an island and nobody else is interested in what you are? Imagine that you talk to other young people of your age. What can you share about that? Because I think in our careers as performers and teachers, we come across all kinds of life paths and all kinds of emotional struggles with pursuing things like what you do, especially at this young, fragile age.
Well, thank you for empathizing. I'm very fortunate because I attend a music conservatory where I have many peers and colleagues who are around my age, maybe a little older, who have gone through similar experiences. And just being in that environment is great because you see what the people before you have gone through, and they're still close enough in age that it doesn't feel so distant. And some of my best friends as well are aspiring performers and musicians. And so to have that support system I'm very grateful for that because my friends understand what I'm going through and they're living through it themselves. What you mentioned about staying inspired, during a pandemic, it was especially difficult. I'm so used to being busy, even if it's not performances, if it's with school, having chamber music to play, having those live lessons, that really keeps me motivated and working toward new goals. And when the pandemic started, everything went away, including school. So it was a struggle, but I'm very happy now to have things to look forward to again and to get back into the grind.
Avery, when did you start going to Curtis?
I started when I was 15.
Okay. So before that, when you were studying music, did you have friends that were also interested in music, or they were from all different paths of life? And
I had friends at school, and I also had friends who were musicians, but not, or who studied music, but were not aspiring to become musicians. And actually, where I met the most people who were like myself was over the summer at music festivals. And that was a wonderful experience because from my day to day, I didn't see anybody who was doing the same thing as myself. But over the summer, I would meet other students who all congregate in the same place to study music and to learn from these wonderful artists. And so that was such a great inspiration to have.
so as being a young person just starting out really on the path of being a musician, what do you feel the role of the artist is in the society?
Role as an artist, to first and foremost share this wonderful music that we've been gifted with, and always as a performer to convey what the composer intended. But in a broader sense, music has such a great impact on so many lives and in so many ways. It's not always about one performance per se, but about inspiring a student that you play for at a school, or just touching somebody's life who maybe they're going through a hard time. You know, I've had performances where an audience member comes up and shares a personal experience, and to me those are the most rewarding, because it means that out of however many people were there, at least I touched one person's life. And moving forward, since the pandemic, I think the role of music and the world of music is going to change a lot as well. So that's another topic, but and interesting to think about, to see how it's going to be different. But at its core, I think everybody could use music in their lives.
No, great. And I'm happy to hear that you're also exploring other genres, you know, and kind of finding other outlets of your creativity, which is really, I think, as an artist, you constantly evolve, right? You're constantly looking, searching, trying to find yourself, as well as, you know, how do you communicate that passion? You know, we have so many passionate musicians out there in the world, and finding that connection with the audience, right? I mean, I've been in performance field, you know, since I was 6, but you know, now I'm on the other side of the story where I'm a presenter, and it's a question I ask myself every single day. You know, how do we find opportunities and create that bond between people who might not be familiar with what it is that we do and what you do, and connect them. You know, it's right about creating that community and moving forward. Yeah, I mean, just enriching our lives, I guess. So, Michael, do you have a question?
Just one. It's a general question. That's how did a mazurka fit into a wedding?
Is that for me or for Magdalena?
Either.
Well, mazurkas were folk music and dance music. So
Really?
at a wedding, I'm sure for the festivities, they would play mazurkas and people would dance. Actually, I found a video on YouTube of people dancing the traditional Polish mazurka, which was very helpful, because when you see how they dance, for example, so the same thing with watching a waltz. Once you are able to visualize how people move to the music, it also helps with the way you conceptualize the music as well.
Thanks.
Can we sneak in a few Chopin mazurkas in the recital? Just to show the difference. Anybody else has any questions or comments? Daniela?
Favorite food, so we can get ready for the party?
People who know me know I eat anything.
Yeah, I heard in one of your interviews that you enjoy cooking.
I love to cook. I love to bake. But
anything, or any particular, you know, style of food that you enjoy
I do
cooking?
a lot of Asian home cooking because my mom's Chinese, so that's what's usually in the household. Baking wise, I love to make cookies or pies, and I explored a little bit with bread over quarantine.
Awesome. Well, sounds great. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to hear you in performance. I'll see you tomorrow at the airport.
Yes.
And thank you all of you. I know some of you cannot join us in the live performance. We will miss you. But those of you who can, please come. You know, the doors will open at 7 o'clock, 6-foot separation, distance sitting, and Daniela, let's have Mazurkas for encore. And I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. It doesn't matter. I'll see you guys at the concert, and enjoy your Valentine's weekend. Write a song or write a poem, even if you don't have anybody to write it for. But that's your homework. Thank you. Take care.